She lost her job at 10:17 that morning. By 2:43 p.m., she was sitting in a cafe 40 minutes from home, crying alone, coffee going cold, and a 7-year-old with a crumpled drawing was about to change her life. Nobody in that cafe moved. People scrolled their phones. The barista wiped the counter. Life kept moving, the way it always does when someone is quietly falling apart inside it. Then the door opened. Her name was Wren, 31 years old, 7 years at a nonprofit she believed in. 60-hour weeks, late nights, grant reports, campaigns she poured herself into. That morning, she'd been called into a meeting and told the organization was restructuring. Her position eliminated. Her cardboard box was still in the backseat of her car. She didn't want to cry at work. Didn't want to call her mom would spiral. Didn't want to text her friends. She was exhausted of always being the one with problems, so she drove 40 minutes to a cafe where nobody knew her name and let herself fall apart alone. And here's what nobody talks about. That feeling, choosing to be alone in your pain because you don't want to be a burden, is becoming an epidemic. Harvard researchers tracked over 300 adults across decades and found this. Loneliness isn't just about being physically alone. It's about feeling like there's nobody who would actually want to hear what you're going through. That's the kind of lonely Wren was feeling at 2:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. Sunglasses on indoors, hat pulled low. The international signal for please don't talk to me. It was working. Then the door opened. His name was Callum, 34, single dad to a 7-year-old named Pepper, who was pressed against his leg like a warm anchor and had already spotted every dog within a 3-block radius. Callum was not having an easy year. His wife had left 3 years ago, not cruelly, not dramatically, but with a note on the kitchen table that said, "I love you. I love Pepper, but I am disappearing inside this life, and I have to go find myself before there's nothing left to find." He'd read that note 600 times. Some nights it made him angry. Most nights it just made him tired. He raised Pepper alone, packed her lunches the night before, learned to braid hair from YouTube tutorials. He carried the emptiness quietly, like a stone in a coat pocket, always there, always heavy but hidden from view. He was here because Pepper had declared hot. Chocolate was medicine for the brain, and Tuesdays were their thing. He got their drinks, found a table, sat Pepper down. That's when Pepper noticed Wren. 7-year-olds have no social filter. None. Pepper looked directly at Wren and said, at full volume, "Daddy, that lady is crying." Callum whispered, "Pepper, sweetheart, we don't." Too late. Pepper was already crossing the cafe floor. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a crumpled napkin, drawing she'd been working on all afternoon, and placed it on Wren's table. "This is for you," Pepper said. "It's a sun with a face. I made it happy because I thought maybe you needed one." Wren blinked. Something cracked open in her expression. And then, despite everything, despite 7 years of work in the cardboard box and the cold coffee and the loneliness, and she laughed, small, surprised, real. Callum arrived at the table, already apologizing. "I'm so sorry, she has no filter." "No," Wren said quickly. "Please don't." She looked at Pepper. "This is the nicest thing anyone's done for me in a very long time." Pepper nodded, like she'd diagnosed a problem and administered the correct treatment. Callum paused. Then, against every instinct toward caution and minding his own business, he said, "Can we sit with you for a minute?" Here's what he didn't do that matters just as much as what he did. He didn't push, didn't ask what was wrong, didn't do the thing people do. "Oh no, are you okay?" in the way that's more about their own discomfort than your actual feelings. He just let Pepper do her thing, and occasionally glanced over with a look that said, "You don't have to be okay right now, and that's fine." After 10 minutes, Wren pulled her sunglasses off. "Small thing," Callum noticed. "Here's the psychology underneath that moment. We call it emotional labor, and the exhausting act of pretending you're fine so other people feel comfortable, and the longer you do it, the heavier it gets. Research shows that chronic emotional suppression doesn't just wear you out mentally, it elevates your cardiovascular stress response. We are literally making ourselves sick by performing okayness. What Pepper accidentally started, and what Callum quietly continued, was giving Wren permission to stop performing. For 2 hours in a cafe she'd driven 40 minutes to reach. Because she felt like nobody wanted to hear it, someone actually heard it. They exchanged numbers, tentatively. 2. People who weren't sure what they were doing, but felt pulled forward anyway. The next Saturday, Callum ran into Wren at the farmer's market 3 blocks from his apartment. Pepper immediately took her hand and dragged her to the stand with honey in tiny bear-shaped jars. Wren bought 3. After that, it became easier. Coffee on Thursdays, walks on Sundays, dinners at Callum's kitchen table with Pepper holding court about whatever had happened at school that week. "You're good with her," Callum said one evening, washing dishes while Wren dried. "She hasn't learned to perform yet," Wren said quietly. "That's what makes her easy to be around." Callum looked at her. She didn't look back. But they both knew she wasn't only talking about Pepper. Then came Tate. Callum mentioned Wren to his coworker one afternoon, and Tate's face did something careful. "You sure about that? Getting Pepper attached to someone who might just—" He didn't finish. "He didn't have to. Who might just leave. Like Nora left." Callum smiled at Tate and said he appreciated it. But that night, he stood in Pepper's doorway longer than usual, watching her sleep, the dinosaur stuffed under one arm, wondering if he was about to let someone close enough to hurt them both again. The emptiness in his chest had started to feel familiar, safe even, and familiar empty was easier than the risk of full and then gone. He closed the door quietly and didn't sleep well. Wren had her own doubts. She was rebuilding on contract work, uncertain hours, no benefits, shaky ground. Some evenings she worried she was hiding inside Callum's warm Tuesday world instead of doing the harder work of finding her own footing. She brought this up one night, standing on his front steps. "I worry," she said, "that I'm just filling the emptiness with borrowed happiness." Callum was quiet for a moment. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe happiness doesn't have to be owned to be real." She looked at him. Inside, through the window, Pepper was dancing alone to music only she could hear. November, gray sky, rain smell on pavement. They were on a park bench. Pepper was chasing pigeons. Callum's jaw was tight, the way it got when he was about to say something true. "When I met you," he said, "I had already decided I was done. Not dramatically, just quietly. That the chapter with someone in it was over. That maybe I wasn't built for it anymore." Wren didn't move. "And then you laughed." He shook his head. "Just laughed at a crumpled drawing. And something came back that I thought was gone." He reached over and took her hand, carefully. "I'm not asking for anything fast," he said. "I'm just asking you not to disappear." Wren looked at their hands, then at Pepper, who had stopped chasing pigeons and was watching them with the small, knowing smile of someone who had always understood exactly how this would end. "I'm not going anywhere," Wren said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The cold stayed cold. The gray stayed gray. But something between them was warm, genuinely, quietly, permanently warm. Spring, Wren became communications director for a children's literacy foundation, work that made her feel like herself again. She brought Pepper a new book every week. Pepper reviewed them like a seasoned critic. Callum got a supervisory role at the warehouse. Steadier hours, a reason to stop apologizing for the life he was building. On a Saturday in April, the 3 of them flew a yellow fish-shaped kite in the park. It nosedived repeatedly. They launched it back up each time, laughing harder with each failed attempt. Callum watched Wren help Pepper adjust the string, mustard on her sleeve, hair destroyed by the wind, and laughing at something Pepper said. That full, helpless laugh he had first heard on a Tuesday afternoon in a cafe when nobody was watching. He thought of the note still in his dresser drawer. "I have to go find myself before there's nothing left to find." He understood it now. He didn't resent it anymore. He hadn't gone looking for this. He'd simply chosen, in one small moment, to let Pepper cross a cafe floor with a crumpled drawing. That had been enough. Here's what I want to leave you with. Callum wasn't exceptional. He wasn't some rare, saintly human. He was a tired single dad, running on 5 hours of sleep with a stone in his coat pocket and a coworker's warning still ringing in his ears. He almost did the drive-through. He almost chose the easier option. He was this close to a version of this story where none of it happens. The barrier to connection is almost never effort. It's the moment of hesitation right before it. The "should I say something" pause. The "it's not my business" thought. The "she probably wants to be alone" assumption. Most of the time, Nobody wants to be alone with the thing that's crushing them. They're just scared to ask for company. Pepper didn't know the rules. And because she didn't, Wren laughed when she thought she had nothing left to laugh about that day. Be a little less polished, a little less careful, a little more in the room. You don't have to fix anyone's day. Callum didn't fix Wren's, he just didn't look away. And sometimes, and that's the whole thing. If this one hit somewhere real, drop a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to remember that connection still exists. Subscribe for more stories like this one. Where are you watching from today?